There is a particular quality to moments in which nothing is required. They do not announce themselves. They do not arrive with ceremony or intention. They simply appear when pressure steps aside. This is not a moment that needs to be filled. It does not invite interpretation. It does not ask to be understood or remembered. It exists without expectation. Time behaves differently here, not slower, not faster, just quieter, as if it has momentarily forgotten to keep count. The body notices this before the mind does. There is a soft easing that happens without instruction. Muscles release not because they are told to, but because they no longer need to hold. Nothing is being prepared for. Nothing is being reviewed. There is no next step waiting in the background. This absence of demand feels unfamiliar at first, not uncomfortable, just unusual. So much of daily life is shaped by subtle requests. Respond, decide, move, improve. Here, none of those signals arrive. Attention begins to widen, not outward, but inward in a gentle way. It is no longer pointed. It is no longer busy. Thoughts still appear, but they arrive differently. They do not rush forward. They do not stack on top of each other. They float through unhurried, like visitors who know they are not expected to stay. There is no need to engage with them, no reason to follow them to their conclusions. They are allowed to remain incomplete. This space does not reward effort. Trying harder does not improve it. Doing less does not diminish it. It is steady regardless of participation. The mind slowly realizes that it is not needed right now. That realization does not come with resistance. It arrives quietly, like a door left open without explanation. In this openness, awareness becomes softer, less focused but more present, less sharp but more encompassing. There is a sense that nothing needs to be carried. No memory must be preserved. No insight must be extracted. This moment does not want to become useful. It is enough as it is. The usual inner narration fades. The running commentary that labels experience loosens its grip. Silence does not rush in to replace it. There is simply less noise. What remains is a steady presence, not dramatic, not special, just there. This kind of presence rarely stands out. It is easy to overlook. It does not compete for attention. It does not assert itself. And yet, it holds a quiet weight. In the absence of urgency, small sensations become noticeable, not because they demand attention, but because attention is no longer occupied elsewhere. The feeling of weight, of contact, of breathing that moves on its own schedule. Nothing needs to be adjusted. There is no posture to correct, no technique to apply, no outcome to reach. This is not rest as an activity. It is rest as a condition. A subtle understanding begins to form, not as a thought, but as a felt sense. Much of what feels heavy in life comes from constantly responding to expectations, to timelines, to imagined futures. Here, response is unnecessary. This moment does not care if it is noticed. It does not fade when ignored. It does not intensify when focused on. It remains neutral. There is a gentle relief in realizing this. Not relief as release, but relief as permission. Permission to stop managing, to stop optimizing, to stop holding experience up to a standard. Nothing is missing here, and nothing is added. The absence of comparison is striking. There is no reference point, no before or after. This moment does not exist in relation to another. It stands alone. Time, usually so insistent, steps back. It does not disappear, but it loosens its grip on attention. Minutes pass unnoticed, not because they are empty, but because they are not being measured. This space does not belong to productivity. It does not serve recovery. It is not preparation. It simply exists. There is no desire to describe it accurately. Language feels unnecessary. Any attempt to name what is happening would only reduce it. This is not clarity in the traditional sense. There is no insight arriving, no realization forming, and yet something feels clear. Clear in the way a surface becomes visible when the water stops moving. Nothing new appears. The movement simply ceases. The mind does not need to hold on to this. It is not fragile. It does not require protection. Even the idea of losing it feels irrelevant. This moment is not something that can be lost because it was never something that was owned. There is a quiet confidence in that. Not confidence as assertion, but confidence as steadiness. Nothing is being asked. And because of that, everything is allowed to be exactly as it is. The simplicity of this is almost startling. Not because it is impressive, but because it is so rarely permitted. Life often demands participation, interpretation, engagement. And for now, that is exactly what happens. When nothing is required, there is often a brief pause in attention, a quiet moment of uncertainty, as if something might still be expected. Attention remains ready at first, not tense, just alert, prepared to respond if needed, but nothing appears. The space does not change. Gradually, that readiness loosens, not because it is dismissed, but because it has nothing to respond to. This absence of structure feels unfamiliar, not uncomfortable, just uncommon. So much of life moves towards something else. Here, direction fades, awareness settles without effort. It does not scan, it does not search, it stays. There is no sense of progress, no sense of delay, and no feeling of being stuck. Without an outcome to move toward, experience it becomes even, balanced rather than flat. Nothing stands out, nothing recedes. Everything exists without hierarchy. Thoughts continue to arise. They do not stop, but they no longer connect into sequences. They appear, pause briefly, and pass. They do not pull attention with them. They do not ask to be followed. Without momentum, they lose urgency. The mind begins to notice how much effort it usually spends holding experience together, connecting moments, maintaining continuity. Here, continuity is unnecessary. Each moment stands on its own, complete without reference. This completeness does not feel full, it feels open. There is little impulse to describe what is happening. Words feel optional. Explanation feels distant. Language belongs to purpose, to movement, to exchange. Here, there is nothing to exchange. Staying becomes natural, not because staying is rewarding, but because leaving has no meaning. Time does not push the moment forward, and the moment does not attempt to extend itself. There is no tension between holding on and letting go. Neither applies. This space does not require protection. It does not collapse when attention shifts. It remains steady even when unnoticed. That steadiness feels reassuring, not because something is confirmed, but because nothing needs correction. Stillness here is not waiting. Waiting implies expectation. Expectation implies outcome. This stillness expects nothing. It is not a pause between actions. It is not preparation. It is simply presence without direction. In this presence, identity softens, not disappearing, but becoming less central. There is less reference to self, less positioning, less internal measurement. Experience unfolds without a center. This does not feel like detachment. It feels inclusive. Nothing is pushed away. Nothing is pulled closer. Judgment fades quietly, not because it is resisted, but because it has nothing to work with. Without comparison, judgment has no task. There is no better or worse here, no right or wrong way for the moment to be. It is allowed to remain exactly as it is. A gentle continuity remains, not the continuity of story, but the continuity of presence. Presence does not shift with content. It holds whatever appears without emphasis. Thoughts, sensations, small movements of attention all pass through the same open space. Nothing is highlighted. This equality feels stabilizing, not dramatic but grounding. The mind, accustomed to organizing, finds little to arrange, and without arrangement, it rests. This rest is not achieved. It cannot be produced. It arises naturally when effort becomes unnecessary. A quiet understanding forms, not as a conclusion, but as a felt sense. Much of what feels tiring comes from constant orientation toward outcome. Here, orientation dissolves. The moment does not point anywhere. It does not suggest improvement. It does not hint at meaning. And yet, it does not feel empty. Meaning is simply not being requested. There is no urge to evaluate whether this moment is worthwhile. Worth does not apply. Staying feels effortless, not because it is pleasant, but because nothing competes for attention. The idea of doing something else does not arise, not because it is blocked, but because it has no momentum. There is a quiet trust that this moment does not need management. Control becomes irrelevant. The moment remains stable even as attention shifts slightly, even as thoughts briefly return. This resilience is reassuring. It suggests that presence is not fragile, that it does not require maintenance. There is no urgency to remember this, no need to carry it forward. The moment does not justify itself by becoming useful later. It is sufficient now. Staying continues not as a choice, but as a simple continuation. Nothing changes significantly, and nothing needs to. For now, staying where nothing needs to happen is enough. At some point, attention begins to loosen its grip, not on the moment, but on itself. It no longer positions itself as the one observing. It no longer stands apart from what is happening. The sense of a center softens. This shift is quiet. There is no signal that announces it, no internal voice that says something has changed. And yet, something has. Attention is no longer focused from a single point. It is not looking out from somewhere. It is simply present. There is less sense of being here while something else is there. The boundary between observer and experience becomes less distinct. This does not feel disorienting. It feels natural, as if something unnecessary has been set down. Usually, attention carries a subtle tension, a sense of responsibility, as if it must keep track, as if it must hold experience together. Here, that responsibility fades. Nothing needs to be held. Experience unfolds without a reference point, not fragmented, but uncentered in a gentle way. There is no longer a strong sense of I am noticing, not because awareness disappears, but because it no longer needs to announce itself. This absence of self-reference feels light, not empty, just unburdened. Thoughts continue to arise, but they feel less personal. They do not arrive as messages. They do not carry urgency. They pass through without attaching themselves to a center. Attention does not follow them. It does not reject them. It simply allows them to move on. This creates a feeling of openness, not expansion, but absence of contraction. There is more space around experience, more room for things to appear without needing to be acknowledged. The usual habit of self-checking dissolves. There is internal question asking, how am I doing right now? That question has no relevance here. Without that reference, experience feels less owned, less claimed. This does not create distance. It creates intimacy of a different kind, one that does not revolve around identity. Presence no longer feels like something I am doing. It feels like something that is simply happening. This is subtle and easy to miss if one expects something dramatic. Nothing dramatic occurs. The moment continues without commentary. There is no urge to describe this shift, no need to label it. Language feels secondary, like something that belongs elsewhere. What remains is a steady openness, a field in which things arise and pass without leaving marks. Time does not feel suspended. It simply feels irrelevant. Minutes pass, but they do not register. There is no effort involved in staying here. Staying and leaving lose their usual meaning. Nothing pulls attention outward. Nothing pulls it inward. There is no incident outside that needs to be maintained. This absence of center feels quietly relieving, not because something was wrong before, but because something extra has fallen away. The mind notices this without reacting to it, without trying to recreate it. Trying would immediately change it. So nothing is tried. The moment remains stable without needing reinforcement. Even when attention shifts slightly, the openness remains. This suggests something important, not as a thought, but as a felt recognition. Awareness does not need to be directed to be present. It does not need to be held to remain. This recognition does not turn into insight. It does not crystallize. It simply settles. The sense of time passing becomes softer still, not erased but no longer foregrounded. There is no anticipation, no memory being referenced. The present does not sit between past and future. It stands alone. In this standing, nothing feels unfinished. Nothing feels complete. Completion does not apply. The mind rests in this neutrality, not bored, not stimulated, just at ease. There is no attempt to prolong this state, no fear of losing it. It does not feel fragile. It feels indifferent to attention. Whether noticed or not, it remains. This removes pressure. There is nothing to protect, nothing to maintain. The moment does not depend on participation. Even the idea of meaning feels distant, not denied, just unnecessary. This does not feel empty. It feels quiet in a full way, a quiet that does not require filling. There is no center calling attention back to itself, no sense of me anchoring experience. And yet, experience continues clearly. This clarity is not sharp. It is gentle. The mind does not try to understand this. Understanding would reintroduce a center. So it does nothing. And in doing nothing, everything remains simple. The openness continues without effort. For now, attention rests without needing a place to stand. Eventually, without announcement, there is a subtle sense of return. Not a return to somewhere else, but a quiet re-entry into the ordinary. Nothing shifts dramatically. There is no signal that this space is ending. It does not close. It does not dissolve. It simply becomes less distinct. And attention does not move away from presence. Presence widens until it includes everything again. The boundary that once felt absent is no longer relevant. This return does not feel like leaving. It feels like continuity. The openness that was present does not collapse. It does not retreat. It becomes background. Thoughts appear a little more frequently now, not intrusively, just naturally. They do not disrupt what remains. They settle into the same space without changing its quality. There is no urge to reflect on what just happened, no impulse to summarize or interpret, nothing asked to be named. Whatever occurred does not need to be understood. This moment does not mark an end. It does not frame itself as an experience that must be remembered. It passes into the ordinary without leaving a trace. The sense of self returns gently, not as a center, but as a reference point among many. There is no sharp contrast between before and now, no feeling of having crossed a boundary. Life resumes without interruption. This resumption does not undo anything. Nothing is lost. Nothing needs to be preserved. The ease that was present does not demand continuation. It does not insist on being maintained. It remains available without needing attention. There is no need to hold on to it. Holding would only make it distant. This is perhaps the most important shift. Nothing needs to be carried forward. Not a feeling, not an insight, not a state. There is no obligation to remember how this felt, no responsibility to recreate it later. It does not belong to memory. What remains is subtle, not noticeable at first, a slight lightness in attention, a quiet absence of urgency, nothing that needs to be protected. The ordinary returns to its place. Sounds, thoughts, small movements of attention. They arrive without friction. There is no sense of interruption, only continuation. The space that held everything does not disappear. It simply stops standing out. It blends back into everything else. This blending feels natural, not like loss, not like fading, just normal. There is no desire to stay here longer, no sense that something special would be lost by moving on. This moment does not ask for loyalty. It does not ask to be revisited. It trusts that nothing important depends on it. The mind does not try to grasp what remains. It does not label it as calm or clarity. It does not turn it into a reference point. Doing so would change it. So it does nothing. This non-action allows the return to be effortless. The simplicity of this is easy to overlook. Nothing announces itself as complete. Nothing claims significance. And yet, there is no sense of incompleteness. The moment does not feel unfinished. It does not wait for something else to happen. It is already enough by not insisting on being more. Attention resumes its usual movements, gently, without rush. But something about those movements feels less tight, less compelled. There is a subtle softness that does not need to be named. It does not interfere with thinking. It does not interfere with doing. It simply accompanies. This accompaniment is quiet. It does not guide. It does not it remains unobtrusive. There is no sense that something meaningful occurred, and that is precisely why it remains intact. Meaning would pull it into narrative. Narrative would demand memory. This moment refuses both. It belongs nowhere in particular. It does not become a reference. It does not become a contrast. Life does not need to adjust itself around it. Everything continues as it always has, and yet nothing feels hurried. The return is complete without being marked. No signal needs to be given that it is time to move on. Moving on happens naturally because nothing was ever paused. There is no need to thank this moment, no need to acknowledge it. It does not require recognition. It does not belong to effort or intention. It was never separate. The sense of listening softens. It does not end. It becomes diffuse. Listening blends into being. There is nothing left to do here, and nothing left undone. This is not a conclusion. It does not resolve anything. It simply allows what is next to arrive without obstruction. The quiet that remains does not ask to be noticed. It stays even when forgotten. For now, everything continues without carrying anything forward.